We now present For the Record.
Welcome to For the Record. I'm Will Keneally. This week saw competing presidential candidate visits with both the Trump and Harris campaigns visiting the Badger State. Now that started this Tuesday with former President Donald Trump visiting the liberal bastion of Dane County.
They are very close to global catastrophe. We have a non-existent president and a non-existent vice president who should be in charge, but nobody knows what's going on. She was at a fundraiser in San Francisco.
That was followed 2 days later by Vice President Kamala Harris making the unusual stop to Ripon, Wisconsin, which is the birthplace of the Republican Party. Now, the event was used to tout some of the recent Republican endorsements Harris has gotten. She was introduced by former Congresswoman Liz Cheney.
History teaches us again and again that democracies can fall. They fall to populists, they fall to strongmen.
Cheney was joined by a handful of local Wisconsin Republicans who broke rank with their party and are endorsing Harris this fall. Now, that included former Iowa County Sheriff Steve Mishek. Now, he introduced Cheney and he spoke with us shortly after. I'm sure there are a lot of Iowa County voters still out there, Republicans looking to probably vote for Trump. What would be your message to them?
I think that my message to them would be that, you might be a Republican. Your uncle might have almost twisted your arm to put a sign for Trump in your yard showing his support for Trump. It's okay if you don't vote for Trump. It's okay. You don't have to tell your uncle that you didn't vote for him. I think that's a message that, it is one of those things that really why does somebody need to know that I voted for Trump or Harris? But I think that happens sometimes. People get asked by a relative or maybe a loved one that somebody they care about actually asks them to put a sign in their yard, and they go, oh, sure, go ahead. Well, it might not be something that they really wanted to do in the first place, and they might be hemming and hawing about the fact that they need to vote for the person whose sign is in their yard. They really don't have to. I think that's pretty simple. I would say that that is something that I see quite often.
Also, can I get a sense of, it seems like it's courageous, especially now in current politics, as a Republican to speak out against the, front runner of your party. Do you feel that sense of,
Sure.
Is it a courageous thing to do what you're doing right now?
I feel that it's the right thing to do. And all through my career in law enforcement, and especially when I was sheriff, it was important for me to instill in my staff, and I would even tell people in the public, that the hardest thing to do is the right thing. This is the right thing to do. This is the right thing, in my opinion, and it's the right time to do it. And, the things that are easy to do are, to end up in jail or end up in legal trouble. And, of course, we already know who's got all of those issues.
When we come back, a look into the presidential betting odds this cycle and the deeper story that they tell about this November election. We'll be right back after this.
This portion of News 3 Now is sponsored by Madison Gas and Electric.
You know you love it. You know you want it. And there's only one place like it, where you can get it. Seafood like no other. Mad Seafood Boiler. Order online for delivery or dine in today.
In 2016, Donald Trump said he would choose only the best people to work in his White House. Now those people have a warning for America. Trump is not fit to be president again. Here's his vice president.
Anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be president of the United States.
I cannot in good conscience endorse Donald Trump this year.
His defense secretary.
Do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
No. I mean, it's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk.
His national security advisor.
Donald Trump will cause a lot of damage. The only thing he cares about is Donald Trump.
And the nation's former highest-ranking military officer.
We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
Take it from the people who knew him best. Donald Trump is too big a risk for America.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Gruber Law Offices. One call, that's all.
They treated me like family.
They're actually people that you can depend on.
They made me feel seen. They really treated me like I was a part of their family, a part of their team.
They ask how you're doing, how you're feeling.
They're just so welcoming and so sweet and kind.
It's like family, caring about another member of the family.
If you've been injured, it costs you nothing to see if Gruber Law Offices can help.
You know you love it. You know you want it. And there's only one place like it, where you can get it. Seafood like no other. Mad Seafood Boiler. Order online for delivery or dine in today.
Welcome back. We see a lot of numbers come through the election cycle, often from the latest polls. But bookmakers also release their odds for those wanting to wager in American politics. Now, we spoke with Allison Prasch and Jason Lopez of UW-Madison, who study not only the odds, but what insight they share about the American electorate. So at the jump, too, I want to mention, too, a resource for anybody experiencing problem gambling here is the Wisconsin Council on Problem Gambling. You can visit their website at wiproblemgamblers.org. But I want to get into kind of the legality question first about betting on American politics. Hasn't traditionally been legal, but it might be changing, as I understand it?
Yes, that's right. So previously, in order to bet on politics, you would have to go with what's called offshore betting sites, which are sites that are hosted outside of the U.S. So that means you would have to operate with a sports betting company that isn't permitted to accept bets in the U.S. So yeah, it was illegal, but recently that's been under arbitration a little bit. So a federal judge ruled that we could allow betting on politics coming up, but it's been appealed, and so right now it's kind of a big question about whether we will see this in our future actually legalized.
And so we get a couple of PR pitches into the station with these odds. The latest ones that we've seen from September 15th show Donald Trump at what's called plus 110, Kamala Harris at minus 130. Can you explain what those odds mean?
Yeah, certainly. So that means that Trump is kind of like the underdog, if putting it in sports terms, that he is less likely to win right now, and Kamala Harris is more likely, but those odds are really, really, really slim. So it's still pretty narrow, is what they're saying.
So
roughly saying, so Kamala was probably about using those odds like roughly like 55% chance to win.
Got it. Perfect. Yeah. And so what that means, I think, literally would be if Donald Trump's at plus 110, you bet $100, you get $110 back if you were to win the election.
That's right. So those describe how money is used and how money shifts between the operators and the sports bettors, but they can be translated into probabilities.
So I want to kind of touch broadly what goes into kind of setting these odds. What are bookmakers thinking about when they develop those raw numbers there?
Well, I think, you know, we aren't going to say that we can know exactly what's going on behind the curtain, right, and how they're making these decisions or choices. But what we do argue, and we've seen historically, is that the way that these bets are set up reflect kind of a broader mood of the electorate, but also when they're bets about specific issues, say when it comes to presidential debates, they're going to really reflect issues that citizens are concerned about or that are coming up, or in some cases are reflecting kind of issues of racism or sexism in the U.S. political sphere. And so it's not just about who's going to win the election and the percentages around those bets or those odds, but also what are the key issues at stake in the election, and do people want to place money on them or not?
I do want to ask, too, because you think of, you know, traditionally a debate performance might move the needle quite significantly, especially this cycle. And as you were mentioning before in the break that you've been looking at the 2020 cycle as well, what tends to move these odds? Is it debate performances? Is it big poll numbers?
Well, a number of things. I mean, we know that debate performances do move polls, they move voters. As it relates specifically to these betting odds, what we've often seen is that the odds will shift and change based upon the issues that come up. So for example, in 2020, if you recall, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. Some of the most contentious bets would be over things like, will Donald Trump say Kung Flu to refer to COVID? Or will Joe Biden say Proud Boys when he's talking about race in the United States, particularly after the murder of George Floyd? Now, if we look at the 2024 cycle, some of the bets that were offered prior to September 10th and that particular debate were asking individuals to bet on how long it would take Kamala to laugh, or in fact, even would someone say tampon during the debate. And so these examples show us, we're concerned about issues of sexism, racism, misogyny in these political debates. And there'll also be questions about who's going to take a drink of water, what color tie will they be wearing. Those are not the same, though. They're not equivalent, right? And it's really important to note that when people are being offered to place bets or wagers on those particular questions, it really cheapens the ability for us to have conversations about really significant issues when it's kind of reduced to this sports betting phenomenon.
Is that reflective of the electorate itself, or is that reflective of the people making these books, making these bets here? Is that probably a tough question to answer?
That's a good question. I mean, I would say that it's both and. I'm not going to draw a complete comparison, right, to say this is true of all of the electorate. It's often the case that, bets about, for example, is Trump going to say Kung Flu, or how long is it going to take Kamala to laugh? Those are interesting bets for people to place money on. They're kind of entertaining, and we know we live in an era that entertainment can equal political participation. So it's not just reflective of the entire electorate, but it does tell us something about what gets people's attention.
Yeah, that's true. And I'll also keep in mind, too, that, even the two entities that we're trying to track here about who's playing the games and who might be voting or engaged in the political process, it might be really different, because remember that as of right now, you have to bet through these offshore companies. And so they could take bets from around the globe. So it's not just a survey of, how people are betting into the system that are just U.S. citizens. They could be from around the globe, too.
You talk about kind of the scientific nature of these polls, and like the Marquette poll, for example, will go very in depth into this is the exact questions that we're asking, this is how we're asking the questions, this is who we're asking. What should just a voter take stock in when they look at the polls versus these betting odds?
Well, I think what you just said of, Marquette or other very high quality polls, both here in Wisconsin and around the country, there is years of academic research that helps us know the sample sizes they're taking, who they're reaching demographically, and that's really important to understand. It's really important to remember that although reading the betting odds can be entertaining, and in fact it can have a monetary effect for you if you choose to engage in them, they are not a scientific sample. They shift and change, and as two people who have studied them for now almost 5 years, we can't even tell you to a certain degree of how those shifts and changes happen behind the scenes. And so I think it's really important for voters to know that if you really want to understand what the electorate is thinking and how they're responding to pollsters, you can go read the crosstabs. They're very clear and explicit about their methodology, the questions they're asking, and they put all of that information out there for you. You don't know that as someone participating in these sports betting websites that offer you an opportunity to place wagers on politics. So it might be entertaining, but it's not the same as the polls.
Have you guys looked at the accuracy? Are these betting odds perhaps a little bit more accurate, about roughly accurate as these polls have been?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the cross comparison, I guess, but I will say that they can be accurate, but the reason for them being able to do so, as Allison is mentioning here, can be like very, very different from the reasons why they end up being that way can be very different. So these things are created for entertainment purposes. They're created to commodify this game, and so these companies can make a profit, right? So they have certain ways to profit off this game, like they want to encourage people to play and therefore get a lot of money into the system. They want to make sure that they ensure a profit no matter how people are betting. And so all of these structures that we don't know all the details of, but we know how they do tend to make money, and that this isn't this isn't an attempt at predicting things. This is an attempt for them to make money and commodify this event. And so while they can end up being accurate, because as people play, you get kind of like the wisdom of the crowd happening, and smart money helps kind of shape where these probabilities and how the numbers end up forming. So while you can get accuracy, these things aren't intended to predict anything. They're intended to make money.
When we come back, a look into Marquette poll director Charles Franklin's setup and insight into how he analyzes and creates the poll that is the gold standard for Wisconsin numbers. We'll be right back after this.
MG&E, building your community energy company for the future through the power of working together. Committed to cleaner, more sustainable energy, driven by innovation, fostered by shared values. Visit MGE2050.com.
Stanton Optical believes eye care should be affordable. Right now, for only $135, you get 2 pairs of progressives, plus all this. All that costs over $200 everywhere else. Book your eye exam today. Stanton Optical, easy's our thing. Welcome to Too Good to Guess. Can you guess how much 2 pairs of progressives, a free eye exam, and anti-glare lens upgrade will cost at Stanton Optical? Only $135? Wow, a deal so good, every customer wins. Book your eye exam at Stanton Optical today.
Kamala Harris is going to significantly raise taxes.
Taxes are going to have to go up?
Kamala's plan will raise families' taxes by nearly $2,600 a year. Under Kamala, prices have already soared. Now she'd make it worse with even higher taxes.
Taxes are going to have to go up?
President Trump will cut taxes again. No taxes on tips, overtime, or Social Security.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Sure, I'm a paid actor. This isn't a real company. But there's no way to fake how Upwork can help your business. Search talent all over the world with over 10,000 skills you may not have in-house. More than 30% of the Fortune 500 use Upwork. Because this is how we work now.
Dare to compare Bob's Signature versus my competitor's similar hybrid mattress. Both have multiple layers of memory foam, but mine is $1,200 less. Sure, they're not exactly the same, but is theirs worth so much more? Dare to compare! In store or at mybobs.com.
MG&E, building your community energy company for the future through the power of working together. Committed to cleaner, more sustainable energy, driven by innovation, fostered by shared values. Visit MGE2050.com.
Need help with a consumer issue? Contact News 3 Now's Call for Action.
Welcome back. The Marquette Law School poll here in Wisconsin is regarded as not only one of the best polls in Wisconsin, but across the entire country, excelling both in accuracy and transparency. LA Law Liberté caught up with poll director Charles Franklin at his home office to learn more about the magic behind the numbers.
Okay, and so thank you for sitting down with us today. The first thing I kind of want to get started off with is tell me a little bit about what your role entails. What do you do day in, day out with this polling?
Well, in terms of making the poll, I write all the questions, revise the questions, sometimes change them overnight when a president drops out of a race at the last minute. Then we have a company that does the field work, actually collects the data for us. Then they send me that completed data and I do all of the analysis of the data, write up the poll release and the results. My colleague John Johnson works with me on all of this and manages the data processing in the background. And then we do the release on Wednesdays when we tell people what we found. In between polls, I go out and talk about it. So I think I'm up to 187 public events this year, ranging from very short things to, hour-long things. But that's enjoyable to me because it gets me out in the community talking to a wide variety of groups and really in many parts of the state. Since I don't teach classes anymore, it's sort of my classroom to get out and be able to talk to people.
And so tell me a little bit about, you talked about all of these steps that have to go into it. Give me a little bit of a timeline. What does that look like from start to end with these things?
It's a little fluid, but in general, think of the period when we go in the field, when we're doing the actual polling, and then back up from that. So we need an instrument drafted and nearly finished about 2 weeks before we go in the field. That has to be programmed, and all of this is run by computers one way or another. So that has to be programmed, checked to make sure that we don't have mistakes in it, didn't misspell a candidate's name or something, and then back up. So that sort of goes in as a draft with 2 weeks to go. Final revisions go in with a week to go. And then unless something unexpected happens, we don't change it again. But before all of that, there's just following the race, understanding what the issues are, what people are talking about, Right now, we're obviously focused on the presidential and the Senate race, but we're also looking for what policy issues are facing the country or the state. Even now, we're doing questions this time looking ahead to the budget that will be debated in the legislature in the spring. So there's a lot of that kind of planning that goes into it as well.
And so I want to bring up something as well. You are ranked #1 on 538 poll ranking for transparency. So tell me, you know, all of this release, you put all this information out here. Why is A, transparency important for polling, and B, how do you make sure that that is something that a standard you're holding?
Yeah, a group of pollsters 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that, started what now is called the Transparency Initiative, and it was a move to try to push us collectively into revealing more information, not secret sauce that you don't tell anybody, but how do you do this? And many pollsters, I think we're well over 100 now, have signed up for this initiative. And what it means is you release every question you ask. You release the complete questionnaire, not just parts of the questionnaire. You release the results for every question you asked. You release crosstabs, that is the breakdown of the answers by various demographic groups. And you provide a substantial methodology statement that explains how you did the poll, what the margin of error is, what other considerations might go into it. We are ranked so high because we've done that from the very beginning. Before there was a Transparency Initiative, we decided right at the beginning that the Marquette Law School poll should be as transparent as we could possibly make it. So all of those things I've been talking about are posted on our website. You can go back and look over the last 81 polls we've done and see how we described our results, how we described the methodology, and so on. And we just thought that was good practice. We're not in a business. We're not selling information to campaigns that have an incentive to keep things secret. We're not working for any interest group that wants a certain outcome. And so if we are here to provide public information, it just made sense from the very beginning to make that as completely public and transparent as we could. And as this rating shows, we've succeeded in that.
And so I want to kind of ask you too, do you have tips for people that see these polling numbers, they see this data out here, and it's a little overwhelming? How do you read that? How do you understand what these numbers mean?
Yeah, it is overwhelming to people that aren't paid like I am to pay attention to it. My best advice is go to one of the websites that post polling results, like 538.com or realclearpolitics.com, and there are others, but those are the two easiest to get to. And just look at the results of the race you're interested in, whether that's the national presidential race or the Wisconsin race, and just look at the last 10 polls that have been done in the state. Are they all pretty close to one another? Do they range quite a bit? Do they show one candidate leading but by different amounts, or do they show both candidates leading in one poll or another? I think that's the best way for interested people to just get an easy sense of how much the polls are varying and how much they're telling a similar story. Both of those sites, 538 and Real Clear Politics, also produce polling averages. So you can see, okay, they've already calculated for you over the recent polls what's the average margin, who's ahead by how much in the race. And I think that is a pretty useful way to get a sense of both the uncertainty, how much the polls vary, and where the average poll is. But the last thing I tell people is, remember, polling was quite wrong, including me, in 2016. We were better in 2020, but still not perfectly accurate. And so the most important thing I'd say is use the polls to help understand what's happening in the race, who's being seen as better and on what issues are important. Those are things that are worth knowing aside from just the horse race of who's ahead and by how much. and just take everything we say with that grain of salt rather than respond to it as if it's got to be exactly right and tell you exactly what the outcome's going to be, because none of us are that good.
We'll be right back after this.
It's the pre-holiday sale at Denver Mattress, and that means everything is on sale. Like the Queen Size Summit, now only $332.49, or get 48 months no interest and free shipping. The pre-holiday sale, on now at Denver Mattress.
Why become a caregiver?
Every caregiver has something unique to contribute to the life of someone else.
I touch a lot of lives as a caregiver. The main thing I think that's most important is that somebody has compassion and is interested in the idea of giving of themselves and their profession.
Become a CDCP today for free. Sign up at wiscaregivercdcp.com.
President Trump, you have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act.
If we come up with something, we're going to do it, and we're going to replace it.
You still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan. There are concepts and options we have to do that.
You have no plan. When Donald Trump was president, he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. You remember what that was like? We, over the last 4 years, have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, and now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. We have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
It's the pre-holiday sale at Denver Mattress, and that means everything is on sale. Like the Queen Size Summit, now only $332.49, or get 48 months no interest and free shipping. The pre-holiday sale, on now at Denver Mattress.
I grew up in Arena, Wisconsin. I have lived and breathed weather here my entire life. The gold star in my life as of age 4 was to be a TV meteorologist in the community that I grew up in, which is southern Wisconsin. The most important part of my job is to make sure that our public, our community is safe, and also to educate the public on weather. We're the certified most accurate team in town for forecasting, so that forecast has to be ready when you walk in the door. Always first, always accurate.
Welcome back. We continue our 3 for the People coverage next week with Tanisha Shaw. She's exploring the importance of the black vote, especially here in Wisconsin. You can see her reporting starting at 6 o'clock on Monday. And that does it for us this week. I'm Will Keneally. Have a great rest of your weekend.
This has been For the Record.